Welcome back, everybody. Please ignore the sound of my dog snoring on the couch behind me. Last week, we talked about two Eastern models. We talked about Ashtanga Yoga and the Eightfold Noble Path. Hopefully, you were able to see some similarities between them. You'll note that they all have a wisdom component, they all have a moral component, and then a meditation component. The thing about the Hindu versus the Buddhist systems, they're in a slightly different order, and yet all the pieces are still there. This week we're going to be turning our view to the West, and we're going to be looking at the map that the Jewish tradition gives us, known as the Kabbalah, which I'm going to say in English, Kabbalah, and the map that the Christian tradition gives us, which is, well, we just call it Christian mysticism, sometimes called the ladder of divine ascent. So let's talk about the Kabbalah first. In the Kabbalah, you are introduced to the tree of life, and you're introduced to the various sephirot, or worlds, that represent basically divine attributes. And in meditation, a person who is working this path will ascend into the various sephirot and to find the wisdom that's there and to know God more and more fully, and thereby knowing themselves more and more fully too. It's an outrageously complex system. Um, Actually, I think the goal is to throw so much information at the person who's working the system as to completely overwhelm and short-circuit the rational mind, so that the mystical insight will come through. And you'll see exactly what I mean when you turn to Hopkins' book. Now, Hopkins' book is beautiful. It's richly illustrated. It's very reader-friendly. But I'm only going to ask you to read Chapter 2. Chapter 2 will have all the basics there, and if you want to go on and get more of a grounding in it and explore further, please feel free to go ahead and explore the rest of the book. And of course, he has suggestions for further reading if you want to go beyond that as well. But believe me, this is going to be enough for this week. Once you finish the Jewish model, you're going to move to the Christian model. Now, actually, the Jewish model comes from the Middle Ages, but the Christian model is much earlier. It actually comes from the 3rd century from a Christian mystic, and in fact, the greatest of the early Christian theologians. His name is Origen, and he's quite an interesting fellow. In fact, he was a little too interesting, and they declared him a heretic. But he's really an anomalous character, because even though he's officially a heretic, everybody still quotes him as an authority. Go figure. So anyway, in Origen's model, we see a kind of a threefold ladder to spiritual attainment that pretty much all of the Christian mystics ever since have used, and it is really foundational to the Christian understanding of how spiritual development happens. So I have written a book called Growing into God. It's too much for you to read for this week. I've included a link to the full thing in case you want to read more of it. But the thing that is most important to read is an excerpt, an article basically that I've excerpted from it. It's a pretty long article. I mean, you're going to be reading maybe half of the book, but nevertheless, all the most important stuff is there. And if you have questions about it, please don't hesitate to contact me. Of course, this is the model with which I work with many of my Christian clients. And those of you who are also going to be working with Christians, this is something that is going to be absolutely foundational and important to understand. So there's a lot of reading this week, but it's really juicy stuff. So let's get started. Enjoy.